familiar faces here. My name is Nusha Malik. I'm the director of the Office of Academic and International Fellowships. We're simply your hosts this afternoon. I'm going to turn the presentation shortly to our 3 London University representatives. We're very fortunate to have them here this afternoon, and I think there will probably want to get through my portion quickly enough so that there may be some time for everyone to ask some questions at the end. I also want to share that we support a lot of fellowships for international study and several that support graduate study in the United Kingdom. We're not going to discuss those fellowships this afternoon, but we have brochures from our office if you're interested. We're also offering an information session on UK scholarships next Tuesday at noon, right here in the auditorium. And we'll have 2 guest speakers, a Gates Cambridge recipient and a Marshall Scholar alumni. And I think the Marshall Scholarship is the program that would most apply to one of the London universities here. With that said, please warmly welcome our guests.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris. I'm from King's College London. I'll pass on to my colleagues to introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Catherine from Imperial College London.
I'm Ghazi from UCL.
So as you'll probably notice by the title of the presentation and where we're from, there's a certain theme running through this presentation. So hopefully you're in the right place at the right time. So today's presentation is really going to be looking at graduate study in the UK, but in particular London, and London as a study destination. We're going to talk about how to apply for graduate studies, looking at master's degrees, what we look for as through leading universities in terms of applicants, and how you go about researching what type of programs you might be interested in. Then we're going to talk a little bit about PhD as well, because that often comes up. Then we're going to look at funding, and then we're going to look a little bit more in particular about, through our institution, we give you kind of a rapid introduction due to our institution, so you can understand some of the differences, similarities, and kind of, again, what we're looking for. Then we're going to kind of open it up to a general Q&A. If you have any general questions that coming to the UK, coming to London, and then we'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards as well if you have any particular institutional questions as well. If you haven't done so already, there is this chair at the back of the room that you can grab on the way out. I believe there's sign-up sheets going around as well. So if we'll get a copy of that, and we'll send you kind of a PDF and a webinar version of this, and it's also being, I believe, recorded for their YouTube channel. So we'll see how that goes as well. So to start with, I thought it'd be good to kind of talk about the benefits of coming to the UK and highlighting in that some of the differences between the American graduate system and the British system. I mean, it's important from an academic standpoint to kind of hit off straight away that a UK graduate degree is recognised internationally. So if you're coming back to the US, I assume most of you that will be the case, a master's degree or a PhD degree will be recognised coming back. We're fortunate, similar to the US, that the UK system is highly regarded and particularly I would say in the US, it's obviously been that long relationship, or the special relationship between the UK and the US, and so we're quite familiar with each other's education systems. What you will find though in the UK is that a lot of our programs, perhaps more so than the US, have this global focus. One of the major reasons probably for this as well, obviously, is the size of our country versus the US, a little bit smaller. So a lot of our programs have this kind of global focus to them, whether it be for your course of study, whether it be in fact actually going on to do some joint or dual master's or PhD degrees that involve a number of different institutions, so you kind of get a truly global master's experience, PhD experience, or whether it just be through the content, and that's across multiple disciplines as well. Also, it's important to highlight, I think, if you haven't already, this often brings smiles to those students that will be predominantly looking at UK institutions, is that we don't typically require the GRE or the GMAT. So that's a big thumbs up if you're just looking at the UK. Obviously, if you're looking at the US as well, no doubt you will have to take those, and that often leads to the question, well, if I'm already taking them, can I tell you how well I've done, hopefully, in these tests? And to put your mind at ease, I often say, sure, include them, but bear in mind we have absolutely no idea what they mean. So a 5 could be spectacular, I have no idea. So it won't have any weighting in your application, but if it helps you, makes you feel better, if you want to include them, by all means do so. Or if you're obviously just looking at the UK, you can save yourself that burden. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. When Scarcy talks about what we look for in graduate students, we'll touch upon the academics later on, but that's why the GPA, your cumulative GPA, and your suitability for the programme is what we're really looking at rather than standardised tests outside the discipline. Financially speaking as well, you'll be pleased to hear that the completion time in the UK is shorter. Master's programmes are 1 year. PhD degrees are 3 years in length. So not only are you saving time, typically you will find tuition is lower in the UK for graduate studies as well. So less time and less money per year. So financially, obviously, that's quite a good incentive. You can also work as a student as well in the UK. I was actually an international student in the US as part of my studies, and I was confined to the campus working because I wasn't allowed to roam off. But in the UK, 20 hours a week on or off campus. So you can discover the delights of working in a British pub, perhaps, or get more of an internship kind of career-focused opportunity as well to generate some extra income as well. We'll touch upon that a little bit more later on. I think the important to note is obviously 20 hours a week is the maximum. What you will find with it being a 1 year programme, you probably won't be working 20 hours a week through the entire academic course. Similar to here, you have peaks and troughs of workload. The National Health Service can also be yours as part of a student. So you do not have to bring over your medical insurance as part of your student visa. You will be included under the National Health Service, and you get coverage like any other UK citizen as well. We also do accept, particularly our institutions, we all have FAFSA codes as well. At the graduate level, this is typically, unfortunately, not aid, like it might be at the undergraduate level. This will be the same in the US. It's mainly loans, but it's important to highlight, I think, that we are FAFSA accredited and we have codes, and we can help guide you through that process should you need to bring over an element of FAFSA with you as well for your graduate studies. Employment-wise, hopefully at some stage that will be a goal in terms of looking for employment beyond study. And I think it's important to highlight two different points under this, is in that I've touched upon already how academically the UK is accepted back in the US. People are very familiar, obviously, but more importantly, perhaps from a career point of view, this is often one of the biggest questions we're asked. If I'm leaving my country to get a graduate degree and then I intend to return to my country, will that put me at a disadvantage from an employment prospect because they may not be as familiar with your institution, I'm not here to network, etc. And so the British Embassy in the US, the main one which is based in DC actually, conducted a survey, a study over the last couple of years looking at US employers, small employers across different sectors, across different parts of the country, basically trying to answer that question. And what that research showed was over 75% of US employers value a UK degree the same, if not more so, than a US graduate degree. And that's not really down to the academics as such, it's more down to the experience that you get actually. The part of the experience you thought could be a negative has actually been proven to be more of a positive. Leaving your bubble, going abroad and getting those new independent skills, intercultural communication. We're in this global marketplace for employment now, and the fact that not many people percentage-wise actually go abroad for a whole degree, particularly at the level that we're talking about, when you return you're bringing different elements that they can't normally find locally, for example. Also, the research showed that outside the US, the UK universities, probably not surprisingly based on our history, are the most known. And our three institutions featured heavily in that survey, along with Oxford and Cambridge, for example, as kind of the top tier institutions that people are very familiar with across the board in the US. If, however, you decide that you love the UK so much and you wish to remain for a while in the UK and work, which is often an aspiration of many students coming to the UK, you do need to be sponsored. Typically, there are different visa categories, but typically a Tier 2 work visa is the main visa that you need to be sponsored for. However, a benefit of being studied in the UK is that you're exempt from something called the labour market test. Now, effectively, this means if I wanted to hire you as a graduate today and bring you over to London, if I was the employer, I would need to show the UK Border Agency what skills are you bringing into the country that I can't fulfil not only in the UK but the EU. Therefore, obviously, depending upon your level, your background, the career that you want to pursue, that can be quite difficult early on in your career. However, if you studied in the UK, completed the full course of study, which a master's or a PhD program would be, you're exempt from that. So I have to pay for the visa, but I don't need to prove that, and that's a huge barrier removed if you decide that you want to remain in the UK after studies as well. Just so we can shape the presentation a little bit, how many people are interested in master's programs? Okay, and how many PhD? Okay, yes, great. So it's a good mix. At Gazi we'll be talking about both of those, but I'd like to highlight at this stage so you can start thinking about this when we get to that section of the presentation. Typically in the UK, you need to have a master's degree before you can go on to a PhD degree. That's because the master's degree is 1 year, it's quite specialised in an area, and a PhD degree, there are no classes. So you have to have a certain level of knowledge to be able to contribute new knowledge. So you won't have any more academic classes, it's going to be a lot more research based with you with a one-to-one academic. And we'll touch upon that in a lot more detail later on, but I see, go.
Sorry, just to go back to the visa situation.
Yes.
So if when you graduate from the master's program and you want to stay in the UK, you still have to pay for the visa, and you also have to be sponsored.
Yeah, it's the same process. The sponsorship is the employer pays for the visa, the sponsorship.
But aren't there only a small number of companies that are allowed by the government that are?
It's a level of job. So if you have to apply for a graduate level job.
Oh, okay. And like, what are are a lot of companies willing to pay for that for international citizens?
It's the same as being here. So when I worked in the US, you have to find the employers that are able and capable to sponsor internationally. So you have to plan ahead. Obviously, if you're graduating in August, end of August, and you start your search then, like similar to here, it will be a lot more challenging. So I normally say to students that have this in mind as an aspiration when they start the program, your 20 hours a week you can do with what you wish. So you should be using that as an opportunity to get internships, network. Obviously, being in a city like London versus being in somewhere like Edinburgh or Oxford or Cambridge, which are a lot smaller cities. And London, as we're going to discover in a moment, as Catherine talks about the employment opportunities, is kind of a global capital for not only domestic jobs but international jobs as well. I should also highlight this is how it is at the moment. It seems to change quite frequently, so you keep track of it. So this is how it is at the moment.
Just to add, in terms of going to your employer, it's good if you're prepared, so you know the latest kind of sort of situation, and you know kind of the process for them to sponsor you. Some employers, particularly the smaller ones, maybe a bit frightened by the idea and think that it's a much more complicated situation. And it is reasonably straightforward, but you, as the future employee, if you can go to them and say, look, you just need to do this, and therefore, it's not that difficult. So it really is, as Chris was saying, good to kind of start thinking well in advance and be prepared yourself to kind of maybe guide them in the information, because sometimes if they're, as I said, smaller companies, they may be less familiar.
Do you know about how much it costs for a company to sponsor one?
It's less than £1,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you're paying for the process, the visa, you're not paying, it's not a big fee. But for example, they may not know that you're exempt from the labour market test, because they try and hire generally, and you have to almost become an immigration expert. When I worked here, I was prepped to the nines, and I basically convinced them, obviously, of the benefits of having me as a non-traditional employee, versus, you have to obviously prove that a little bit more. But you bring a whole wealth of experience that they wouldn't normally get, and they don't need to do the labour market test. So, okay, good question. So, yes.
I'm wondering if the work visa situation is the same for European citizens as
Good question. If you have an EU passport, ignore it.
Ignore it.
You can free movement. You can go anywhere you like, for as long as you like. As everyone frowns and looks at you now. If you have an EU, you're fine to go. Yes.
How long are you allowed to stay to find a job after graduation?
Good question. Do you recall offhand? It's 3 months.
Something like that.
3 months, I think, roughly. At the end of your completion date. So officially your program is in September, and we give you about 3 months after that to secure a job. But you shouldn't be waiting to then. You can obviously start early at the end of your program. So, but the other thing to say is, and we'll move on just to make sure we cover everything and we can come back to these, is that you can't leave the UK and then decide to come back 6 months later and get a job. You will be classified under the labour market test. It has to be continual. Once you're there, you have to remain there, and obviously when you move on to your work visa, you can then come home for a while and come back, but you need to have that in place before you leave. Okay, so just bear that in mind as well. So I'm now going to pass over to Catherine to talk a little bit about London as an academic destination.
Okay, so just a quick show of hands, who's actually visited London? Quite a few of you. Good. Well, quite possibly, I'm sure you went to many of the kind of big tourist sites. I'm sure those of you who haven't been to the city have heard of many of the big kind of institutions, kind of museums, galleries, things like that. But we want to try and highlight them, highlight how you can use these in your programs and the kind of extra resources you get. So what it's really like to be a student in London. London really is a global academic capital. You won't find anywhere in the world with so many students and such concentration of academia. We have 40 universities in London, over 400,000 students from over 200 different countries. So it really is a melting pot of academia. And we do have world-class resources to back this up. So many of those kind of museums and galleries are on offer for you to go and use as part of your studies, and quite often we may be using them as part of our programmes. So institutes such as the Shakespeare Globe, the BFI, the Royal Academy of Art, for example, may be incorporated into some of our programmes. Also, our institutions may have specialist sort of museums and galleries that are particularly there for our study areas. So there's things such as the Gordon Museum of Pathology at King's and the Grant Museum of Zoology at UCL. Also, London is home to many leading professional bodies and institutes as well, which are on offer for you as a student. So things such as the Royal Institute, the Royal Geographical Society, the Institute of Engineers. These will all have additional lectures, libraries and resources that will be open to you as a student to go and use. So you're getting more than just the kind of traditional library facilities of a university. Also, as our universities are highly ranked and we are in a busy capital city with many kind of passing sort of heads of state, leaders of industry coming through, we often provide things like open lectures that are open to students to go into. So you could be listening to the head of the UN or a world minister come through. So again, you get to kind of hear these sort of sides of the story, this kind of idea of your studies coming to life rather than just reading about them in books. But of course, books, we also have quite a few of those, and we have 395 public libraries in London alone, so really no excuse not to find the one you're after. And we would really argue that these facilities aren't only unrivaled in the UK and Europe, but arguably the world. So we mentioned a little bit about employment. The real advantage of London is that it really is a hub, no matter what your kind of interest in career. So rather than kind of having different cities with different kind of industries and specialisation, whether you're interested in politics, finance, economics, culture, the arts, media, science, engineering, everything goes on in London. So no matter what your field is, there is no better place to start thinking about building those networks and looking for those kind of networking opportunities to build those relationships with future employers. Each of our institutions have fantastic career services. They're on offer from day one to really help you start out on your career path. So whether that's looking at kind of technical aspects, so things like helping you design your resume, to interview skills. They'll also look at things like networking. So we have things like employer days, where we invite employers from a certain sector onto campus. So you can go and say you're interested in the legal profession, you can go and meet with a whole group of legal firms, for example. Our students are very highly sought after, so our career services pride themselves on building on networks with employers who particularly want our students. So especially if it's a certain field, or we have a great history of placing people within certain industries. This obviously gives you the advantage of kind of starting to kind of do these internships and build those networks for your future careers. Just to highlight as well, we want to kind of talk about the extra support you get as a graduate student in the UK. So the term graduate school in the UK is quite different to what you're used to here in the US. The graduate school for us is an extra support body that is in place within our universities. So no matter what your subject area is, you'll have access to an additional support mechanism called graduate school. This body will provide sort of support when you first get there, so things like orientation, for example, getting to know the city, sort of help you fit in and meet other graduate students. But they also offer things like graduate-only workspaces. So you know that you can go to a certain area and kind of sit and work, probably in a slightly quieter kind of area than maybe the undergraduate areas. But also things like they'll offer transferable skills, particularly for graduate students. So again, looking at things like presentation skills, research skills. So these are sort of extra support that's on offer that you don't get as an undergraduate student. I also wanted to give you a bit of an idea about how you might go about researching into where you want to study in the UK. So one of the things you can start looking at to kind of get a broad sense is things like international rankings. Obviously you see who's kind of highly ranked overall. However, what we want to say is you really need to drill down more into the subject area for graduate study. As we said, the master's 1 year in the UK, so it's very focused. So you want to know that you're going to the best place for your particular subject area rather than the kind of overarching ranking of the institution. You can start by looking at things such as findamasters.com or hotcourses.com, whereby you can put in your subject area and then it will pull through a list of all the institutions in the UK that offer that subject, so that's kind of a starting point. But you want to then make sure you are visiting the individual websites and the individual programme pages as well to really drill down and find out what it is exactly involved in these particular courses. You may have, for example, an MA in history at one university and an MA in history at another university. Despite the fact they have the same title, they can be very different courses. So what you want to do is make sure that you're looking at things like what we call the modules. So these are kind of your programme choices, your course choices within your degree. You often find that there's a kind of core module set that you must take, and then also we'll offer you flexibility to choose the areas you're interested in. So you want to make sure you are drilling down to this kind of level to make sure that you're not kind of applying for a history programme, for example, that covers a very different area of history that you're not interested in. So do make sure you do your research. I'd also recommend that while you're here at university, do talk to your professors as well. As we've said, the UK is very highly recognised and they will be familiar with where is good for their subject areas in the UK in a lot of cases. So do ask for recommendations of where they think, if you're majoring in a certain area, where they think you could really kind of develop your studies further in this area. I'll now pass over to Ghazi to talk about the application process.
Okay, for those of you who put your hands up regarding a master's degree, the big difference in the US and Britain is generally the time period. We offer master's degrees that are 1 year in length, but at the same time they're very, very specialist master's degrees. For example, in the undergraduate level in the UK, the degrees are very specialized already and the masters take it a one step further level. There are some degrees which are 2 years, and they're generally the research type degrees, so Master of Research or Master of Philosophy, and I'll go a little bit into that in the next slide when we talk about the PhD programs. One thing to think about when you're applying for master's degrees in the UK is, as my colleague said, look into the subject area, but specifically look within our institutions, look at the exact module list. Is it exactly what interests you? Is that what you're after? An economics degree, for example, a Master of Science in Economics in UCL will be very different from Oxford University as in the content. So have a look, don't look down the list and say, oh, UCL's ranked number 4 in the world, I'm applying for their economics program, great. Really dig in there and look, because it might be that you might not be interested at all in our economics program. And that will reflect on your personal statement because it'll show how passionate you are about that about that specific focus within the subject itself. Have a look at the entry requirements. In the UK, there's something called the Russell Group institutions, and there are 22 universities in this group. So if you look at the power of Wikipedia, it'll give you the full list of the 22. And these are the research-led institutions. These are the institutions that are going to give you the best quality of education. They are going to ask for the most demanding grades, of course. But when you're looking at the actual research that's coming down to you, it's coming down from the postdoc level to the PhD, to the master's, and all the way to undergrad. And it's going to be cutting edge, up-to-date information coming through. Have a look within those universities. Have a look in the subject areas. In the UK, we have a classification called a 2-1. These are the entry requirements. These are the minimum entry requirements for the Russell Group institutions generally. And that requires a 3.3 GPA minimum. So wherever you see a 2.1, that's actually a 3.3 equivalent. If it says a 2.2, that's equivalent to a 3.0 GPA or higher, up to the 3.2 level. Bear in mind that these are really the bare minimum grades that we'll look at. So when an institution says 3.3, and if you're talking about institutions such as Imperial, King's, Cambridge, and UCL, we really do mean a 3.3. So if you don't have a 3.3, it's best not to probably push that application and try and apply. A 3.3 is the minimum. For example, in the MSc in Economics at UCL, our minimum says a 3.4. But in reality, we're looking at 1 in 9 applications that will get in with a 3.4. And it depends on the year. And it'll be the same again at King's and Imperial. It depends how competitive it is. Which leads me on to early applications. we will have deadlines saying, and this is across the UK, but specifically within the top-ranked institutions, we'll have deadlines that will say, this is the deadline, apply by this time. I would definitely err on the side of caution and don't look at that deadline too much. That really is more academic in nature. You need to be applying about January, February time at the latest to be very competitive for the coming September. So if you're applying this September, you need to be looking about right now completing your application. The reason is that we're looking at the top-ranked students, but of course, it's a first-come, first-served basis. So it's not like we can hold on until the very end of the deadline. So bear in mind that, with regards to referees, reference letters, and so on. Make sure to do your research within our certain specific departments. The specific department in the UK that you apply to. So for example, if you're applying political science master's degree, you're actually applying to the department. It's not a centralized admissions department. You're actually applying to the tutor himself within that department. Therefore, the personal statement needs to be very, very targeted. We are looking at what you've done in the past, why you're passionate about the subject, where you want to go with that subject, why you've chosen it at our particular institution. But more importantly, so you gauge and you have a really strong idea of what to put on the personal statement, your passion will show through the personal statement. You need to be looking at job descriptions, possibly. For example, a political science degree, let's say you apply to political science at UCL, they will be looking at your personal statement and be thinking, why do I want to teach this student over any other person? So if your idea was to, let's say, work in the United Nations, you would need a skill set to take to the UN. They expect someone to have international relations, but in reality, they're looking for, do you want to be a PR specialist? Do you want to be a journalist at the UN? Do you want to be an economics researcher for the UN, and so on? So you need to balance and have a look where your interests lie with where you want to go, and where do you want our degree to take you. When you put these two together and you put that in the personal statement, I think that will carry you a long way against the competition that you're up against when you're looking at applications. For example, UCL will receive 30,000 applications a year, and will accept 3,000 of those 30. So this will all help you. Many of the students will have the grades at King's, Imperial, and so on, but it's the personal statement that is going to make the difference. The academic references as well, and so they need to be within that certain field that you're looking at. Again, they'll need to reflect your capabilities academically, as well as how focused you are. So these are the types of things that you need to be looking into for an application to one of our institutions. Now for the PhDs, how many here were looking at PhDs? Okay. For PhDs in the UK, it is normally a master's degree that you complete, and then you go on to do a PhD. So the master's degree is generally a year, and the PhD 3 years. There are some institutions that will allow you to progress from a bachelor's to a PhD, but that's definitely an institution-specific situation and a course-specific situation. So you need to double-check with the actual supervisor, and I'm going to take you through that in a moment. The one thing you need to think about as well is in Britain, when you apply, let's say you already have a master's degree and you want to apply to a PhD, when you're talking to the top-ranked institutions and you apply to a PhD and you're, let's say, given an offer, in the first instance, you'll be probably offered something called an MPhil, so a Master of Philosophy. And so basically, don't panic when you see it and say, I don't want to do another master's degree. The reason for that is they'll switch you over to a PhD, full PhD status after usually the first year of research. It's to gauge the quality of research and your academic progress with the supervisor and the tutor. You definitely need to do a lot more homework for a PhD. You're going to be looking at the specific area, not only the subject area, but the specific angle you want to take your PhD. So if you go to, let's say, a general website like hotcourses.com, which is a website that searches all of the UK for master's degrees, bachelor's, and doctorates, you put the subject in, and they'll give you all the institutions that will offer a PhD. You can then look at the subject rankings for those PhDs, go to our respective websites, and contact the supervisor directly. Say, my name is so-and-so, I'm interested in this subject, this is my GPA, this is my institution, and this is the angle, this is what I'm thinking about writing. So maybe a paragraph or two. They'll then get back to you and say, fantastic, we've got a supervisor available, or it could be possible that we can work with you on this, give us a research proposal. You would then go on and fill out the form. So don't go straight into PhD forms and fill them out. There are some of the lower ranked institutions might be able to take you straight from a bachelor's to a PhD, and of course this varies from institution to institution. Scholarships and funding, which my colleague Chris will talk to you about in a moment, are available. for the most part for the PhD and then the master's degree, but not as much. Each of our institutions will have certain scholarships available for international students. Some of us will also have private type scholarships. For example, at UCL we have the Centennial Scholarship, and you can put many of these scholarships together, so you can apply to more than one at a time. The thing to remember with scholarships and funding, which my colleague Chris will talk to you about, is the deadlines for those scholarships as well. So they slightly vary a little bit from your PhD or master's process as well. Just quickly going over the sciences and humanities PhDs, the differences. One would be more lab-based, one would be more library type based. I would say the humanities is very independent, whereas the lab-based you'll be meeting perhaps on a one-to-one basis, on a daily basis, for example, in the lab, whereas it might be a bi-monthly meeting for a humanities type subject. And I can answer any questions on PhDs individually as well after the presentation. Do I have any general questions about right now, masters and yep.
For applicants who, let's say, are hovering closer to that GPA minimum requirement, do the admissions officers also take a close look at activities that the students were involved with for their undergraduate careers? And
That's a good question. In some institutions they do, but it would have to be very close with the GPA requirement. I know at UCL they'll be looking generally at the 3.3, for example, if that's the bare minimum. And the work experience and so on, that will help you to perhaps overtake someone else. But it's not a strategy in the sense that will provide you a place, because your work experience can make up that shortfall in the GPA. But each institution will be different.
Yeah, what I would say is that kind of in terms of extracurricular activities, we don't really look for that in the personal statement, so it is all about the relevance to the subject. But sometimes relevant work experience can make a difference. So if you've done, and particularly because we ask you to upload your transcript, so if we see that you're doing very well in particular areas and maybe it was an area that's not relevant to the course, that drags you down slightly, that sometimes can play into it.
Any other questions for now? We'll be taking more questions individually at the end, and then institution-wise you can come talk to us as well. So I guess I'll just sort of,
yeah, great. So the holy grail of funding and finding scholarships, etc. So what you're going to find in the UK is slightly different than the US, is that scholarships typically are going to be smaller. Historically that's been the case because tuition's been lower, so we haven't had as much to invest into scholarships. Similarly, like in the US, what will happen will be there will be more funding available at the PhD level than there is at the graduate level. The graduate level has always been seen as kind of a career advancement degree, so it's kind of a return on investment for you versus kind of the PhD where you're giving back and your research is contributing. Having said that, there are a number of big kind of golden ticket scholarships, I guess you could say. What you're going to find is though that most of our scholarships are merit-based, not financial needs assessments based. So the big ones that we have on here for our institutions that we work with quite closely on, for example, is the Marshall Scholarship. And you're going to find, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this now because obviously your office here is going to provide you some more information, but to kind of talk loosely about what that is, it's essentially a scholarship for kind of the relationship between the US and the UK. Our institutions not only have general Marshall scholars coming to us, but we also have partnership awards as well, which means it's a King's Marshall Scholar every year, so UCL one, etc. So in addition to getting general scholars, we work with Marshall quite closely to also allocate funding to help fund those scholarships. Fulbright you're probably all familiar with as well. That's not just the US, UK, you can go anywhere with that, but particularly for Fulbright you're going to discover in more detail, you're really going to have to demonstrate why the UK for that particular research experience. Both of those are obviously very, very competitive. It's merit-based, they're looking for the best students from around the country for the Marshall. So yes, you do need to apply almost a year in advance for those as well. As Garth touched upon, our deadlines are usually around March, end of March, somewhere around June time for master's programs into the September that you want to come into. We only have that one intake every year. But scholarship deadlines are typically earlier, and they're not automatic. So just because you haven't to come and study with us doesn't mean you're automatically going to be considered for funding. And that's also true at the PhD level, which I know is very different. So here you get offered the PhD with a TA position, for example, and you basically, here you go, you're guaranteed funding pretty much. In the UK, you get an offer for your graduate degree or PhD degree, then you have to then work out how you're going to fund it effectively. At the master's level, most of the scholarship deadlines are going to be at the end of March, beginning of April time for our institutional scholarships. So these are some links to those. Effectively, like similar to here, not only do we have the national and international awards, each institution will also have their own scholarships. You will find these are obviously going to be smaller than the big kind of golden ticket ones, and most of them are probably going to be no more than 30%. It's not common to have big scholarships, but you can apply for multiple scholarships and group them together. As the applications are rolling, scholarship deadlines are kind of early to reward students that plan ahead. So if you are looking at scholarships, you need to work that into your timeline. Some scholarships you need to just have already supplied your application, and then you can apply for a scholarship. Others you need to have an offer before you can apply for a scholarship. Bearing in mind that most of our application turnaround time is around about 2 months. It varies by time of year program, but I would say that's a good average of 2-month turnaround from a completed application to a decision. So bear that in mind as well. And then, as I said, at the PhD level, what you will do is you will work with your department to not only find institutional scholarships that they may be aware of, but also obviously research-focused scholarships based on your area. For the sciences, not surprisingly, it's a lot easier to get funding, because actually in the sciences, typically you're applying for a PhD like it's a job. We want research assistants in this X area to deliver this research project. You join that research group. By doing that work and contributing to that project, you get your PhD and you get paid for that. Okay? The arts and humanities and social sciences, typically you come with your own research in mind, and then you need to find funding to produce that research. So it's a kind of more of a dialogue involved trying to help you get that funding. And at the master's level, it's typically scholarships that we have, but also it's important to have a look here in the US as well for scholarships that you may be eligible for, because you will probably find there's a lot that are more based on the academic subject of study and not the destination. So a lot of scholarships are transferable outside the country as well, from industry or from research bodies, etc. as well. So you can investigate that. Moving on a little bit now to talk about our institutions. Those of you that have been to London, hopefully this will be familiar. Hopefully you got out your hotel rooms and explored. While carrying your umbrella, no doubt, along the way. So as you can see from here, this shows you that we're in the centre of London, effectively. London, probably like LA, has been expanding over the decades. There's now 6 zones in London, if you look at the tube map. However, this is the traditional centre of London on this map. So this is all Zone 1. We are based in the heart of the city. On the bottom left there, you can see Imperial College London. That's in the neighbourhood of South Kensington. So if you've been to the V&A Museum, the Science Museum, the History Museum, the Royal Albert Hall perhaps, which is sophisticated in your viewings, that's all in that area there as well, right next to Hyde Park. In the Bloomsbury area, north of that, you can see University College London. That's near the British Museum and the British Library as well. King's is slightly different in that we have 3 different campuses along the river, depending upon what you study. The one slightly north of the river is the Strand campus, that's next to Covent Garden, the West End, kind of the Royal Courts of Justice, etc., Trafalgar Square. And then across the bridge is our Waterloo campus, and that's on the south bank. If you've been to London, so it's right next to the London Eye, House of Parliament, and then you wrap around the river and you walk past the Tate, the Shakespeare Globe, and then you get to our Guy's campus at London Bridge as well. So all these campuses are easily accessible to each other as well, right in the centre of London. Moving on to my part then, talking a little bit briefly about King's College London. Probably not surprisingly by our name, we're not that creative in the UK. We're founded by a king, and we're in London. So they're the 2 main components of the name, I think, in that. We were founded in 1829 by King George IV, who by most is probably not the best king we ever had, but actually in the US, King George III is probably the one that you don't like in particular, based on the historic nature of that. So in this part of this presentation, King George IV was the best king we ever had. Okay, and William's just brought in another George as well along the way, so in the future we will continue that. We are a research-led institution, as Garthi was saying. We're all research-led, we're part of the Russell Group. We are the 4th oldest university, UCL are the 3rd. We are one of the founding members of the University of London, along with University College London. Now, the University of London's never been a university. It's quite simple to explain this in California, fortunately, because you have the University of California system. It's a system of universities. Rather than being across a state, it's across a city. So we're all focused on slightly different areas. We all are competing to a degree, different rankings, etc. as well. We have over 25,000 students at the university, and about 35% are international, from 150 different countries. So it's very much a multicultural, diverse international campus, but at the same time, hopefully if you're considering coming to the UK, you have that opportunity to meet British students along the way as well. Hopefully that's what you want to do at some stage during your studies there. Our motto is in service of society. And that ethos really shapes our teaching and our research. So for example, we're the largest provider of healthcare training in Europe, and we have the most scholars devoted to the study of international relations, conflict and security that contribute nationally and internationally to policy in that area. Over the past few years as well, we've launched a campaign entitled World Questions, King's Answers, with the purpose of raising over £500 million to tackle some of the world's biggest problems. For example, how do you cope with an ever-aging population? What would it take to eradicate poverty? And why can't we find a better treatment for cancer? So these kind of ideas across multiple fields are shaping our research. What does that mean for you as a student coming to us? It essentially means we're beyond an academic bubble. The idea of the university is to provide you a platform to engage nationally, locally, nationally and internationally, regardless of field. This idea of giving back and serving society through what you do in your research and your teaching and your studies. As you can see from the slide, this is taken from our history seminar room, and that building there, Somerset House. If you've been to the London before, half of that, or rather a wing of that, the east wing, is actually now where our law school moved into recently as well. That's right on our Strand campus. So not only can you see we're in a great location, but more importantly is what we do with that location. So again, we have a number of partnerships outside the university to engage with. So for example, we have partnerships with the British Museum, the Shakespeare Globe Theatre, the British Film Institute, and this gives our students access to opportunities outside the classroom. We also, in all our master's programs, encourage internships. Again, this idea of getting opportunities while you're there. So a lot of our students work at some leading organisations, ranging from the BBC, IBM, to Oxfam, for example. We discussed earlier this notion of London kind of being this global hub, this global gateway as well, and we have a number of joint programs as well. So for example, in the US, we have a global comparative history program with Georgetown University, where students do 1 year with us, 1 year at Georgetown, and they get a master's degree from both. We have 9 schools of study, and the pamphlet at the back goes into more detail, but to give you some idea, we offer a wide range of academics, everything from the arts and humanities, so Shakespeare, philosophy, theology, etc., history, English, all the way through to biomedical sciences, so neuroscience, pharmacy, pharmacology, anatomy, through to medicine, law, dentistry, nursing, and social science and public policy. So that's things such as international relations, counter-terrorism, global health, public policy, development, sustainability, etc., management, marketing, and everything in between, robotics, etc. The things that we don't have are performing arts, architecture, and engineering. Those are our big 3 areas that we don't cover, and my colleagues will be talking no doubt about those as well. Because we get so many students coming over from the US now, the US is our top international destination, I guess. We now open a USA office where I'm based in the DC area. So the idea of this is to help provide that network before you go and when you come back, and provide support and continue to enhance the college's profile. And we do have a number of merit-based scholarships that are quite substantial as well. So I encourage you to have a look at those. I guess to kind of conclude, to give you an idea of people that come through King's over the years, for my part, and show you the variety of alumni that we've had. We've had everyone from Thomas Hodgkins, identifying Hodgkin's disease, Florence Nightingale, founder of the first professional school of nursing, which is still in operation at King's today. Novelists such as Virginia Woolf, John Keats and Thomas Hardy. And my personal favourite is probably Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It's a whole range of people that have come through the university over the years. I'll now pass you over to my colleague Catherine to talk about Imperial College London.
So this is a picture of our South Kensington campus, our main campus. For those of you who did visit some of the museums, you may have walked past us. So just starting down here, we've got the Natural History Museum, going to the Science Museum, and that tower in the middle there is Imperial College. And this whole area was really championed for the development and kind of promotion of science and technology alongside culture during the 19th century by Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. So we have a royal connection as well, and that's very much part of Imperial's heritage. We are a specialised institution, so we are quite different to the other institutions here today. So we really do specialise in science, technology, engineering and medicine, and also we do have a postgraduate business school as well. A bit more about what we're like today. So we are very cosmopolitan, so about half of our student population do come from outside the UK. We're also very good at what we do. So I said we're specialised. We consistently ranked in the top 10 and often the top 5 of global rankings. The good thing is about being specialised is we can offer a very wide variety of courses within these subject areas. So we do have over 160 one-year MSc programmes. We have 9 engineering departments open to postgraduate students, and we have the largest graduate medical cohort, so covering a whole range of areas from clinical to things like public health and global health, for example. But we don't just offer courses for the sake of it. One of our key mottos is innovation to application. So we're really looking at how to translate world-class research and teaching into practical solutions to world problems. As a result, we have been heavily backed by the UK government, and we've opened now 11 centres for doctoral training, which is more than any other institution in the UK. And it's really encouraging the way we look at how we encourage our scientists to work with our engineers, to work with our medics. So they're covering areas such as neurotechnology for life and health, sustainable civil engineering, and fluid mechanics. And this whole idea of kind of working together to solve world issues can be seen by some of the kind of student work that goes on. So a group of electronic engineers set up a project group to look at designing a rechargeable battery box. So the idea was that they could design this battery box and it could be taken abroad somewhere. So it was taken to Rwanda and actually looked at replacing the way a whole village powered itself. So previously kerosene cans were being used, and if once the kerosene had run out, you'd go buy your new kerosene can. This was replaced by the battery box, which brought electricity for the first time to these homes. Once the battery had run down, you could take it to an energy kiosk to be recharged and take a new one away at the same time. So this obviously was environmentally sustainable, but it also was economically sustainable. So it was modelled in the same way and the same price model as the kerosene cans. This then was backed further, so it was actually backed by the Rwandan government. And since then, these students have now graduated, and although it is an undergraduate project, our engineers still get involved in. They now have set up their own spin-out company from this called Bbox. So they now have offices in 7 different countries across the world, in places like Indonesia and across Africa. And actually just 2 months ago, they were given a $1.5 million investment from a company in Silicon Valley to take this on even further. And that really kind of highlights the advantage of having the business school at Imperial as well. We can really kind of offer sort of an entrepreneurial sort of support to the kind of ideas and sort of the areas we are looking at in the sciences and engineering. Within the business school, we have sort of traditional business programs as well. So we have things like finance, strategic marketing, health management, for example. We also have some interesting programs that are set up for those with a non-business background. So we have an innovation or entrepreneurship masters. We have a management masters that really is aimed at scientists, engineers, or even people from the humanities, for example, who have not taken business modules but want to get into a management sort of level job. We have a really good tradition of working closely with not only UK but also international governments, industry and commerce. We receive more industrial investment, more investment from industry than any other UK institution, and we're consistently building up these links. All our graduates receive award-winning graduate skills training programs, and they do go on to do a very wide range of things once they leave us. So of course we are good in the sciences. We've got 14 Nobel laureates who have come through our doors in this area, but we've also had past prime ministers, heads of top CEO companies come to Imperial. We've had the first Canadian in space with his PhD at Imperial, Ferrari chief car designers. And as it's quite relevant at the moment, and we are in the home of Hollywood, I'd like to mention the fact we have 2 Oscar winners amongst our alumni as well. So although we do have a drama society, they're not that good. Last year, 2 of our alumni who graduated in computing won awards for the work they've done with their company Imagineer, which works on special effects in films. So they dramatically sped up the process of special effects, which previously you had to do kind of frame by frame by frame. They worked on special effects in films you might have seen, such as Black Swan and Born Identity. And probably my favourite fact is they are responsible for removing Lord Voldemort's nose in the Harry Potter films. So if you're interested in being part of an institution that really is pushing the boundaries in science, engineering and technology with a real entrepreneurial underlying spirit, please do talk to me at the end about Imperial. I'll now pass over to Ghazi to talk about UCL.
Thanks. I'm just going to give you a brief snapshot on UCL and then I can talk to you individually. UCL is the third oldest university in England after Oxford and Cambridge. We were founded as a classless university, so in the sense that we were the first to admit women students as well to campus. The university is known for its academic strengths. We were best described as an intellectual powerhouse with a world-class reputation by the Sunday Times, which is one of the major newspapers in the UK. The amount of research that we do per year across the full breadth and depth of the academic spectrum is only rivaled by Oxbridge. So anything from anthropology to zoology, including architecture, engineering, medicine, dentistry, law, social sciences, and so on. What we classify as 4-star is world leading, and the majority of our research is world leading. So this is the type of research that's going to filter down to you on a daily basis whether you're doing your master's degree or your PhD. It is a very international university. 40% of our student body is from outside the UK. We have 30,000 students, and the second largest cohort of students is from the United States. The ratio is roughly half women and half men within the institution. This year we're ranked number 4, so we held on to our 4th spot in the QS University rankings. So we're really pleased with that because it is a very competitive environment. But the thing I would urge you to take with you today is UCL is a fun campus. It's not just about academics. We do expect you to involve yourself with university life and so on. Our student union is very active. That's our version of the Student Government Association at UCL. So it is a distinctive community. And I would say that UCL is a global university, not in the sense that just our students from all over the world, but it's the excellence in the teaching and the research that we do that we apply to the world's current global problems, and trying to solve those problems is what makes us London's global university. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'll take those on an individual basis, but I think we're going to do general questions first. One thing as well I just wanted to add is that the types of alumni that have attended UCL in the past would be, for example, Mahatma Gandhi of India went to UCL, Francis Crick, who was the co-founder of the structure of DNA, went to UCL, and Alexander Graham Bell was the inventor of the telephone, went to UCL. So these are the types of alumni that you'll be following in the footsteps of, and hopefully taking us forward with you as well into the future. And in this case, I'm going to take any general questions, and then we can take institution questions.
Any general questions? Go for it. Go to the next slide.
I'm just wondering what the general view is on taking a year in between your undergraduate and your graduate study. So if I apply a year after I graduate, what is the view of that?
Completely fine. We really don't mind when you apply for it. Obviously, it can actually strengthen your application if you're going to do a year kind of work placement or kind of volunteering, internship, that kind of thing. It can actually make your application stronger. But otherwise, we're fine. What we would say as well is that with the academic references, you probably want to make sure you have kind of thought about your references before you leave.
Okay, yeah.
Are there such things as thesis, masters, rather than coursework masters?
Yes, it's interchangeable essentially. Basically, what will happen will be the structure of the master's degree will be 9 months of classroom-based teaching. So you typically have, it varies slightly, but let's simplify it. Say you have an autumn and you have a spring, and then by the end of May, beginning of June, you have then June to the end of August, effectively 3 months to write a thesis, dissertation, a course or whatever you want to call it, and then that will roughly be 15,000 words. So that will conclude your master's program essentially.
If you wanted to focus more heavily on the thesis, say you had an idea of something, like a project you already wanted to work on.
What's your definition of a thesis?
Well, it would be a master's in philosophy in this case, which makes sort of sense why it would be thesis-based, I guess.
Yeah, do you mean, so at the graduate level, writing a dissertation or a thesis, basically the difference between that and a PhD is you're only looking at secondary research discussion based. So you're not conducting any primary research for us. It's typically how we differentiate.
Right, I'm just a little confused because I don't know what you consider secondary versus primary research?
Primary would be you going out and conducting, collecting data.
Right,
So-
in terms of if of a philosophy master's,
Yeah.
you would never do.
Yes, you
something
might
like that.
interview and do collect. You would probably do a lot more interviewing, build, and you write more than 15,000 words, for example.
Yeah.
So it has to be self-contained within the 15,000 word limit for dissertation. But we can talk. I'll talk with you more. We have that program. So we can talk more in detail. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I graduated from London School of Economics, and I'm interested in PCL's cultural study. And I have two questions. One is about the attendance for PhD. I remember it's really for 4 years, but admission at 3 years for PhD.
It's 3 years for a PhD program. Yes.
It's only 3 years?
Yes. Some students may take longer, but the idea is it's a 3-year program.
Okay, and second question is about the visas. I just heard that UK has new T5 or T2 visa for international custodians. They have 3 years to work in that
No, science. There's a visa for science and innovation and entrepreneurship. That we haven't really touched upon. Tier 2 can't work automatically. Well, you have to renew it. So Tier 2 will have a limit. It's not an indefinite visa, if that's what you're referring to. So we touched upon a Tier 2 earlier. Once you have it, it's not a permanent visa. You have to. It's initially it will be for a few years, and you have to renew and move on to a different visa classification. So yes, if that's what you're referring to. Any other questions?
Approximately when do you make applications available each year?
It varies slightly between institutions. Ours open in November. I think you guys is October.
Yeah.
So.
So October, November.
Great.
When you're applying, do you have to be able to show a way in which you're going to, I guess, pay for your tuition other than loans? Because I guess I've read it for some schools that when you're applying, like your only form of payment to the university can't just be loans. You have to provide some additional.
You have to show. We don't require it. The UK Border Agency to get the visa requires it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to show that you have at least £1,000 a month to cover living costs, books, rent, food, travel, on top of your tuition. Okay, to get your visa. That's effectively what you have to show. So 12 months or £12,000 plus the cost of your program, and you have to show you have access to funds. So that could be FAFSA loans, bank loans, parents, perhaps probably not. Hopefully for them, your own savings, etc. You have to show you have access to that, and there are some further guidelines in terms of the money can't suddenly appear in your account, and then there's no way that it come from track record. And most of our students that come to us will bring FAFSA and take out the full entitlement of that, and that letter is enough for UKVA to show that you have access to funds. Obviously, hopefully the national federal government collapses. Maybe likely.
I'm interested in an LLM, and I know that generally you need a bachelor in laws to apply, and you don't have that degree.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you have any advice for how to compensate for the lack of that?
You can't compensate for the lack of that. You won't be doing an LLM, but you'll be doing a master's. A master's in a law-related area, but it's not an LLM. The LLM is the professional accreditation, so you have to have an LLB or a US law degree. But this is where it's confusing. So that's an LLM, and there are masters in law, which are like an MSc in law in certain law subjects that are not for professional lawyers, basically. So you don't have to have a law degree. That's the best way I can explain it. So it might be taught within the law school, but it won't be an LLM. It will be a MSc in whatever it might be, transnational law or something for law professionals, essentially. But they're quite limited. The idea is obviously in the UK, you should have a law degree, and your LLM enhances your specialty within a certain law area. It's the general idea. I don't know. Do you have any? Do you know if you have any MSCs at UCL?
No,
or
not
just at LLM.
go straight. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a few general masters in law that's not LLM, but it will always state on the prospectus, our course catalogue, under the requirements. Obviously, because it says you must have a law degree equivalent, that's not you. You'll be looking for more the MSc ones. Yes.
You talked a bit about entrepreneurship. Let's say hypothetically a student has an abysmal GPA, but they've started multiple successful business ventures. How would you view that?
For our institutions, that wouldn't kind of work, unfortunately, with the kind of, as we said, with Russell Group, so we are sort of pure academics. As I said, sometimes, if there's a slight sort of dip in a non-relevant area, that kind of thing, all that can make an application stronger. But really, for the three institutions here today, we are sort of top academic institutions, so we do need to see that academic record.
Yeah, there are some other universities that will be more looking at, or have slightly lower requirements, obviously, and looking for more people that come in with different experiences and things will be weighted more. So there's quite a lot of universities people would like in the States. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. If you have any individual questions, let us know. Yes.